Baller, Shane Black from Hook'emHeadlines.com. We're coming back at you today. First video with, Shane or Tark and myself in a while, but sorry for the hiatus there. I've been sick and health stuff for the last couple of weeks, but we got plenty of basketball videos to catch up on. I got a Max Asmus video. We're recording this on May 7th. I got this coming up later this evening. That'll be posted. Still got Zarek on Yemna and then Kendall Weaver. But today we're taking more of like a high level look at where Texas is at in terms of like the rebuilding of the roster right now, what needs still remain, and, kind of how a small recap of how we got to this point. What are we at? 8 scholarship players now, and that's assuming Tyrese Hunter returns. Lost a few players to the portal, a couple of players to decommitment, and a couple of players to lack of eligibility. Shane, kind of what are your thoughts on the offseason so far, the roster as it stands now?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a very interesting offseason to say the least. It started with Terry immediately, getting that deal. And then since then, the roster turnover it's been interesting to keep an eye on. I mean, we knew the seniors that had exhausted their eligibility that were a big part of last year's team. So we were expecting those departures. But then these other departures, like Terry Morris, Ron Holland decommitting, AJ Johnson decommitting, coming as a little more of a surprise. But then RT was able to bounce back and get a guy like Asmus and Kendall Weaver and Shedrick. There are a lot of good names that RT has brought in. So it's been a really up and down offseason. Texas Twitter is always very reactionary. And when one name goes, it seems like the sky is falling, and then another name, gets signed and everyone's spirits are lifted back up. So overall, I think RT's done a pretty good job. Obviously, we'll get into some of the departures, losing Ron Holland, who's now rated as the #1 player in the class of 2023 for 24/7 Sports. That's a tough loss if he does not, reaffirm his commitment to Texas, which I don't know if you know anything about that, Andrew, but I'd be surprised if he did, just considering he backed out so late.
Yeah, I mean, Holland, I said this when he first decommitted from Texas last week, that just the basic rule in recruiting is that, when a player decommits, it's very rare that they end up recommitting to a certain school. I don't remember the last time that a Texas basketball player decommitted and then recommitted to Texas. Do you?
I don't have, not top of mind.
I know he's heard from a lot of schools. I did a video on this like a week ago when it first happened, like kind of reacting to the news, and then just was thinking what's next for Texas and what's next for Ron Holland. And my understanding for Ron Holland is that Kentucky's getting back in the mix here. The G League is potentially opening up as a possibility. I actually think the G League is more of a legitimate possibility than most people think, for a couple of reasons. I'm not going to get too deep into that because I kind of illustrated that in my video already that I did last week. But Kentucky, Arkansas, I think UCLA is, pushing a little bit here. Arkansas is the most common name or most common school that I've heard about, though. I think there's a good to fair chance that if he does end up at another college, that he doesn't go to the G League or go overseas or something, that the SEC is probably where he's going to be. But Texas is still pushing here. I did an article on this on the site like a few days ago that Texas isn't letting off the gas. So there's a lot of voices swinging Holland in different directions. And, Rodney Terry and his staff are still evaluating this situation and, kicking the tires to see if they can get Holland back.
Yeah, but I mean, that would be major if they were able to get him back. And college basketball has completely changed with the transfer portal. It is still a little off-putting to see, 0 guys in the class of 2023, freshman signees, where it stood, when Beard had AJ Johnson, Ron Holland in this class and was still going after another couple 5 stars in the fall. That was promising. And now it's 0 guys, which is, really unfortunate. But I mean, it's a day and age of the transfer portal, and we can get into the guys that Texas has added. But I think all in all, this roster looks like a top 20-ish team, and that's exciting.
Absolutely. So I'll say this, because I do want to get this point across, is that I think as far as like high school recruiting is concerned, it, there's always going to be those guys out there that are going to be like developmental guys or, close relationships with Rodney Terry, maybe Texas legacies, like those sort of guys that are just kind of slam dunks for Texas. But you got to choose a path to some degree. Rodney Terry, this is his first year, so I always assumed that this was going to just be a lot of experienced guys via the portal on the roster. And what do you know? We have 3 upperclassmen that we've already added via the portal. And I think, one or two more guys that we add are going to probably have a good amount of experience too, maybe one of which will be developmental, but like, I think they're looking at like a lengthier wing that's going to bring some experience to the table. They were going after Reese Dixon Waters earlier this offseason from USC. I think that sort of guy, he's a junior shooting guard. And so I'll say this about like the transfer portal versus high school recruiting with guys like Ron Holland, with guys like Trey Johnson, AJ Johnson. Like, obviously, this is a day and age of the portal where you don't have to hit on like 2 or 3 5 stars in every single class. Like, to some degree, I think that can put you at a disadvantage because now you got all these teams, all these big time programs that are juiced up on experienced and proven players. A guy like Trey Johnson, I mean, if he comes in and, Texas is able to get a commitment out of him in the 2024 class and he does, he's a future top 5 pick in the draft, great. That accomplishes the deal here. But if Texas doesn't get any like big time high school kids that end up going to the NBA, that's really going to hurt your recruiting in the future.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that could be, part of the reason. I mean, we saw Dylan Mitchell come in as a high 5-star guy, and it's definitely not an apples and orange comparison, but kind of plays the same position as a Ron Holland. I think Holland's more versatile and, much better scorer, but that could have been part of the reason that Holland, that led to his decommitment, because he saw kind of Mitchell was underutilized, and come tournament time, Mitchell really didn't play all that much. So, like I said, apples to oranges there, but it's always something to look forward to or look to, because, like you said, you need to have that balance, and relying on one way or the other, whether it be all transfer portals or developing from the high school ranks, isn't going to work in today's day and age.
You're right. So, but again, I mean, I'm not judging Rodney Terry too much this first year because like I knew he was going after experienced players. I think that's the right move. So right now, I have the starting lineup at Max Asmus at the 1, Tyrese Hunter at the 2, assuming he returns, withdraw. He has to withdraw but from the NBA draft, I believe, by like June. It's early June, maybe June 1st. So we'll know soon. Kendall Weaver at the 3, the new transfer from UTA. Dylan Dessou at the 4, Caden Shedrick at the 5. So that's the starting lineup that I've got projected right now. And then 3 scholarship players on the bench. I got 6-year forward Brock Cunningham, the new UTEP transfer Zarek Onyemna. He plays power forward. And then the 8th guy I've got in the rotation is Alex Anamikwe, former 3-star recruit that's returning 2nd-year forward. Do you have any, conjecture there, like different thoughts or feelings on the starting 5 so far?
So I wouldn't push back too much. I think the backcourt and Hunter, if he comes back, and Asmus is pretty much a shoe-in. I mean, we saw Asmus when he was interviewed by the Field of 68, talked about playing with Hunter. It almost seemed like he knew something that we don't. I would say Weaver, maybe Terry puts him in a 6-man role like Sir'Jabari Rice. I could see him coming off the bench, but then being a guy who closes out games, kind of like that trio of guards that Texas had last year with Marcus Carr, Hunter, and Rice. But I think when it comes to starters, Hunter, Asmus, and Dessou are the shoe-ins, and then kind of that wing spot and another big are how you fill it out. And I mean, we mentioned this off air, but Dessou and Shedrick are an interesting fit down low. So that's kind of my one hesitation there, because I feel like Shedrick is a pretty solid starting center, but how does he fit with Dessou? Do we want to run Dessou at the 5, which I think he's more effective in today's age of college basketball as kind of like a stretch 5. But, I think it's going to be one of those things where it's going to be flowing, especially during the non-con. I think we're going to see a lot of different lineup combinations. And I know it's getting late, but I think, RT is still hoping to potentially land a guy with that could be a starting caliber talent. Like I said, it's getting late in the cycle in regard to transfer portal, but if Holland could be that guy, or there's a couple transfer names out there, that would be a huge boost because I do think there are a little bit of cracks on this current roster in that depth chart that you just listed.
I would absolutely agree with that. I mean, I think that I would feel comfortable with 10 scholarship players if there were like one more solid, like starting caliber player, whether that's a lengthier two guard, preferably a lengthy 3-and-D wing. Actually, I don't even need to be a good 3-point shooter. It might actually be better to have like more of a slasher. But, definitely a lengthier guy on the wing that's more proven. And then if you want to take on a developmental guard that's, got some real upside and at least a decent floor, I think that's a good way to go too. Because, I mean, Tyrese Hunter maybe sticks around for 2 more years, but A. Smith is gone after this year. Weaver, you got around for a few years, potentially, unless his draft stock just goes off the chart because his skill set is very valued in the modern NBA. Yeah, I think the small forward position is where we need to address the portal. That's my opinion of the most pressing area. I know they're going after someone there. I just don't have any names. Like Matthew Cleveland, transfer from Florida State. They've been in contact with him before, but nothing since initial contact was made. I've mentioned this name a good bit. Trey White, USC transfer. I kind of wish they would be pressing a little bit more with him. He's a freshman small forward transfer, about 6'6". I think he's a good guy to go after. Reigning Pac-12 freshman of the year, or Pac-12 all freshman team at least. But again, made initial contact, couple of conversations, and nothing really since. He's visited Louisville and UCF in the last couple of weeks. So I would assume that those are two of the top schools in that recruitment. And I mean, like you heard Damian Collins, and I think Collins was kind of a backup option if Texas didn't land Zarek Onyemna. So kind of like Caleb Boone when they were going after him, when they were kind of prioritizing Shedrick. I think Caleb Boone was the secondary option. So, I think for front court depth, I agree with you. I'm not a fan. I'm not the biggest fan of Shedrick and Dessou together. It's just not the best for spacing. But I think you can make it work because you got 2 really solid 3-point shooters in A. Smith and Weaver that could be in the backcourt. And then you also have Tyrese Hunter, who can be a good floor spacer and is a pretty good off-ball threat, especially from the elbows.
Yeah.
So what would you, if they were to add someone from the portal at the 3, what skill set would you want?
So the Weaver commitment was massive, just in regard to what he's done from beyond the arc. Because you mentioned it there. You originally said a 3-and-D guy. A 3-and-D guy would be awesome. But that 3-point shooting might not even be, the most coveted skill set we need because Weaver was above 40% last year as a freshman. A. Smith, in his 4 years at Oral Roberts, was one of the best, if not the best, high-volume 3-point shooter in the country. So I have no issues with him there. And you mentioned Hunter can get hot, especially, from the wing. So 3-point shooting in the backcourt is pretty solid. So I think someone just who can kind of handle the ball, almost like in a Timmy Allen role, can get that ball in the high post or the short corner, knows what to do when he gets it, high basketball IQ, high motor. I think, Brock Cunningham is going to get a good amount of run at the 3. And when you were going over your starting lineup, I'd almost be inclined to say Cunningham is going to get the nod at first just because of his experience and he knows kind of what to do. And I like that. Obviously, he doesn't have much of an offensive game besides knocking down that 3, but he's good at running the floor, knows where to be on the floor, passes well. And that's kind of someone that I'd be looking to add here. It'd be nice to add someone who can turn into a first or secondary scorer on the offensive side, but I don't think that's necessarily something you need.
No, because I think people sleep on how good of an initiator Kendall Weaver is. I ran some numbers where what was it? He ranked in at least the 75th percentile in shooting foul percentage and one percentage. He had he averaged half of an and one bucket per game last season, which,
Wow.
considering he wasn't playing at an extraordinarily high volume, or like getting, asked to create at an extraordinarily high volume, that's really impressive. Especially considering he's 6'3", like 165. I mentioned this in the article I did for his breakdown earlier in the week, that if he puts on like 10, 15 pounds this offseason, really gets in the weight room, especially with the additional floor spacing he's going to have at Texas. I get that like the matchups aren't going to, I mean, he's not playing in the WAC anymore, so it's going to be harder to, fight through contact and get to the bucket, but still, improved floor spacing, if he adds some weight, I mean, he can be a really, really solid secondary playmaker. I mean, A. Smith is your primary guy, and then you got Hunter. So I don't necessarily. I agree with a lot of the points you make. It would be nice to have another guy that's lengthier that could make some plays and be a little bit more mobile. Where I see the glaring need is length on defense. I think that we need more of a switchable defender, maybe a guy that's going to be faster than Dessou or Shedrick. That can defend the 3 or the 4. Because we had Timmy Allen playing at the 3 last season. I think a lot of people forget how good of a defender he was. That he was insanely switchable and had the best defensive season of his career. So, I mean, at worst, we had Serge Bari Rice, who was at least an aware defender off ball, 6'4", a decent wingspan. So he was taller than anyone we would have playing at the 3 right now. Again, like you said, unless we put Brock Cunningham there. I'm not worried about floor spacing as much. I posted this stat on the site the other day that having Brock Cunningham and Kendall Weaver, this is the first time since entering the 2008-09 season that we've had at least two 40% three-point shooters on the roster that shot 40% or better in college in the previous season, if that makes sense. So having 2 established like 40% or higher three-point shooters along with Max A. Smith and Dylan Dessou can shoot the 3 ball pretty well. Not Cunningham. Tyrese Hunter, if he's on. So we already have more 3-point shooting than we did last year.
Yeah.
And so I'll wrap this up, this whole spiel. Yeah, I just would like a little bit more length. I'm gonna say that we should probably be prioritizing defense first. And I mean, we got guys that can get to the basket, but like, maybe someone, like you said, that can be another I guess maybe another facilitator to be more like a Timmy Allen. I mean, you're going to have Kendall Weaver. He's a corner 3-point shooter, so we don't need someone that can post up in the corners. Tyrese Hunter, a guy from the elbow. Max A. Smith can initiate from above the break. So I don't know if there's necessarily a spot where we need a 3.
Yeah, I mean, it does worry me looking to potential additions as well. I mentioned the 3-headed guard lineup of Hunter, A. Smith, and Weaver, which is similar to the 3-headed guard lineup Texas had last year. But off of those guards, Texas had Timmy Allen and Arterio Morris, who could both initiate offense and play with the ball in their hands. This year, on this current roster, besides those 3 guards, there's really, no one you feel comfortable with bringing the ball up court. And I think that is a little bit of an issue. You mentioned potentially getting a developmental guard in the portal. I think that would go a long way. Just to have another guy there who is comfortable with the ball in his hands. That's why I think Rowan Brumbaugh was a pretty, it could be a bigger loss than we realize. He was a 4-star guy and more of a Chris Beard guy, which is why he left. But just having another, guy in the backcourt that can handle the ball and you can throw him in if, injuries happen or foul trouble happens. But right now it's pretty thin back there, and you're relying on these guys. I mean, you're going to be relying on Tyrese Hunter and Max A. Smith to play 32 plus minutes a game next year. And that can be sustainable, but when you're playing 18 Big 12 games, they're going to get beat up. There's going to be some games where they get into foul trouble. So I think it's also important that Texas looks for someone that can initiate offense. So if you mentioned that 10 scholarship number we're hoping to get to, I think adding a wing, that skill set up in the air, but a long wing who can defend is crucial, and also add someone who can play, like the 4th guard in this rotation and can be someone that Terry can rely on if need be.
Yeah, no, I agree. I love a lot of the points you make. Yeah, I think there's still some bolstering that needs to be in the backcourt. I'll mention this a little bit later in the video. I know that you got to get running here before too long, but I'll cap it on this for at least part of the segment with us two on the video. Where do you think this team ranks in like a generic position in the top 25, or do you think that this current roster with the potential to add more is even a top 25 team right now?
So this whole video we've been going off the assumption that Tyrese Hunter is coming back. So when I say this, that is, including Tyrese Hunter on the team. But this current roster, I think, is at like towards the back half of the top 25. You got a good mix of experience coming back. I do think that people might be a little like getting Dylan Disu back was massive, and that was kind of the ball that started everything rolling this offseason. I do think there could be a little overinflation of how he ended the season in the Big 12 tournament and in the NCAA tournament. Because, I mean, if you look at it, he was a very up and down player for Texas last year. It was his first year kind of fully healthy after that knee injury. But, he really wasn't. It was almost like a surprise the way he was showing out, especially in the tournament where he was just going ballistic. So I think I would pump the tires on Disu being like an All-American, 18-point per game type of guy. But yeah, in general, I think the top end talent is there. And with the 8 scholarship guys, if you did only end up running with those 8, you could make it work. I mean, you look last year at like Kansas, they only ran 6, 7 guys, and they're one of the best teams in the country throughout the whole year. So, I even towards the back end, I know you'll probably get into these players later, but like Anamikwe, I think he showed some flashes last year. He's just going to be a guy who hustles and plays hard, almost like a Brock Cunningham 2.0 with a higher ceiling. But right now, I'd say like in the 20 to 25 ranges is where I'd put the Longhorns, which honestly I think is a pretty good spot. Obviously, they were highly ranked last year, but the year before that, we saw Texas start in the top 5, I think, and then end up being a 6 seed. So I almost like that range of the 20 to 25. You kind of can play your way up in the non-con with some of those, non-conference tournaments, but there's not so much pressure where you feel overwhelmed to start the season.
Yeah, no, you make some good points. And I think for the CBS Sports top 25 and 1, I think we rang in at like number 19, right behind A&M. So I think that's a fair assessment. I was going to put us, I think we're a little bit better than A&M, but like we're grasping at straws here when we're talking about like us versus USC versus A&M versus Baylor, Arizona, and UCLA. I would actually make a case that Baylor is probably better than us right now. They just have so much talent coming in, especially with Eves Nisi reclassifying to the 2023 cycle. So I think that's a fair assessment. There's a few more points I was going to make. I don't know if you have to get up and running here.
Yeah, I got to sign off here. But I will say in regard to the basketball program as a whole, I mentioned this earlier, but it did feel like the sky was falling for a quick second there. And I've said this in previous videos. People aren't going to give Rodney Terry a fair shake, just kind of how it all went down. I think that's unfair. If you're watching this as a Texas fan and you were anti the Rodney Terry hiring, I would say just give it some time. I mean, the Texas brand is going to sell itself, but Terry proved he was a pretty damn good coach with some in-game adjustments that we saw in the Big 12 and NCAA tournament. And, this kind of roster turnover is just the new age of college basketball. So it's to be expected. Obviously, losing the 2 freshmen in the class of 2023 is tough, but Texas will recover. And I think having Max Abmas on this team is going to be awesome. He's going to light up the Moody Center. There are going to be some games this year where it's Abmas is going to score 10 points in a matter of 90 seconds, and the crowd's going to be going crazy, and it's going to be a really fun watch. So I like the way that Terry's building out this roster, especially with kind of the early attrition that he did suffer. And I'm excited. I'm bullish about Texas basketball, and I don't think we're, approaching anything near the lean years. I think, it's going to continue to trend up. And
so, Shane just had to log off, but there were a few more points I wanted to make here before wrapping up the video, just talking about Texas's roster and what other needs could be presented for the rest of the offseason that Terry's got to address specifically in the portal. First off, I think that Shane made the point about getting a developmental guard and how important that will be for the Longhorns. In the near term and over the long term, I think one guy, like maybe an example that sticks out to me from the last couple of years that could be a good example of the type of player Texas is going after is maybe like a better version of what Texas had a couple of seasons ago in Devin Askew. Texas landed Askew out of the portal from Kentucky. He was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school. I believe he was from Texas. He kind of served as the backup point guard for Texas behind Marcus Carr during the 2021-22 season. And, I think there was a lot that he left to be desired. I think there was a lot of potential that was kind of untapped for him, even through his second season in college. And, he ended up entering the portal after his first season at Texas. But he was a guy that was a solid defender, could run well in transition, and at least gave you a primary ball handler that you could be confident in. At least being able to set up the offense, even if he wasn't able to be like a primary initiator or distributor. So I think that, going after more of a long-term developmental guy, Texas got Zarek Onyemna in the front court. And, Onyemna, while I think he's more of an immediate impact guy, he's got 2 years of eligibility remaining. I think that, Rodney Terry can kind of hone in, you kind of progress him over the course of the coming season. And then, he can potentially be a really dominant big man down low during a senior campaign in 2024-25. So I think that's a solid get. Maybe a guy, if you're looking in the backcourt here, maybe a guy that has more eligibility remaining, more like Kendall Weaver that has 3 years of eligibility remaining at Texas. But I think portal is going to be where they address the remaining roster needs and, to fill what I would imagine would be 2 more scholarship spots via the portal. So, but anyway, for Andrew Miller and, Shane Black earlier from Hook'emHeadlines.com, that's pretty much it. Hook 'em.